So a lot of the people that come to me for therapy tend to be folks, like I said at the beginning, are high achievers. They tend to plunge themselves into their work or their passions very deeply. Um, but kind of like what I was saying a minute ago, um, don't really truly understand, why they're doing what they're doing, or they're feeling as though they are unfulfilled, even though they're doing a lot of things that should be fulfilling. Maybe they think or believe that they don't have anything to offer the world, and so they feel disconnected from themselves, from the people around them, from the world that they live in.
Hi, and welcome to The Holistic Entrepreneur, where we explore innovative approaches to healthcare through conversations with pioneering practitioners. I'm your host, Zane Myers. Let's dive into today's episode.
Okay, welcome to another edition of The Holistic Entrepreneur, and I'm pleased to have TJ Walsh with me today. And TJ, on your site, it says you're a coach, artist, therapist, strategist, and guy who gives a lot of caring.
A lot of
You
caring,
have to go to his site to get it. And let's start off with a plug. What's your site?
Sure. That site that you're referencing is tjwalshcoaching.com.
tjwalshcoaching.com. And then you can find out the rest of what what he cares about on that site. And then your podcast is called Bold Creatives.
Bold Creatives Collective podcast. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you're a little bit different than most of the guests that I have on. I have on a lot of people in holistic healthcare, and you're related, but also in kind of a different kind of way.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to talk to you about that. Some of the stuff it says on your site, but figured I'd just get it straight from you. Tell me, what is it that you do, TJ?
Yeah. So I do. As you alluded to when you were reading that line from the site, I do lots of different things. So first and foremost, I'm a licensed professional counselor, which means I'm a psychotherapist, and I work with all different kinds of artists, creatives, high achieving entrepreneurs, those kinds of people that are just really driven in pursuit of excellence. And so I work with folks in the clinical arena, work with issues pertaining to their relationships, to their ability to balance everything that they want to be doing in life, and helping them through those mental health struggles that come along. Then I'm also a coach or consultant for therapists, mental health practitioners in private practice. So I help those people develop their private practice to be one that gives them energy as opposed to drains them. Help them develop a brand and visibility strategy that attracts ideal client fits, so that they're not just, casting a net out there and collecting people who don't resonate with them and vice versa.
A common mistake.
Yeah, it was a very common mistake for therapists, especially people who leave grad school and go into community mental health or larger kind of group operations where they're required to see people that just, walk through the door and who need help. When we're in private practice and we're developing a certain type of business, we have the luxury and really the expectation to serve people who we're really passionate about, so that we're able to help them in the most profound and beneficial ways possible. So I work with people in that area too. So I split my time.
I got to turn off that sound like a train was coming through. I have
It's okay, no worries.
turn off my alerts in that. So typically, I saw also that you have events and workshops and group coaching. We can kind of get into that as we go.
Yeah.
But typically, what's the primary thing that you do, or what takes up the majority of your time?
The majority of my time is clinical psychotherapy, running a private practice. That's probably about 60% of my time. The other 40% of my time is spent coaching other private practice people, providing supervision, consultation, speaking at conferences, teaching. I'm an adjunct professor at a university in the Philadelphia area. So that other 40% of my time is taken up with those kinds of things.
Okay. So tell me, I always like to kind of go back and go through some regression, I guess you'd call it professionally.
Sure.
Let's do some regression therapy and look at, how did TJ Walsh end up in where you are right now?
Yeah.
What led up to this? What were the formative things that kind of got you here?
Got me here. Sure. So, like I think so many therapists or so many people in the helping professions, we've had personal experiences ourselves with whatever it is we end up going into. And so for myself, I had some pretty significant mental health challenges over the course of my adolescence and my early adulthood that really led me to wanting to help other folks. So there was a period in my time where I lived with an eating disorder, anorexia nervosa, which is the primary diagnosis. And then out of that came some diagnoses of bipolar disorder and things like that. And so I really had some pretty intense experiences with therapists, counselors, psychologists, all of those folks. And they were primarily positive, even when I wasn't a real willing participant in that process myself. And because they treated me so well and I was able to see progress and growth in my life to the point now where, the eating stuff is generally under lock and key and my other mental health stuff is managed well. It left a really great impression on me. Then there's also the part of me where people would come to me and just really open up about their life almost automatically, telling me things that they haven't really told anybody else about before. And it was out of those experiences that I realized that I could probably get some extra training and education around how to actually help people instead of just be a friendly ear.
You do have a very soothing manner. Yeah, I feel like a very soothing manner.
Told that. Yeah, I've been told that. It's something that just comes naturally to me. And then there was a period of time where I had a totally different career. I was on a different career path for
so now I'm curious, what kind of different career, or maybe you don't want to say, but
I can
now
say.
I want to know what kind of different career was it did it before you?
Yeah. So my undergrad is in painting, fine art painting, and design and communication marketing. And so I was a creative director, an art director, a designer for about 15 years for international and national nonprofit organizations in New York and Philadelphia.
But you didn't leave that behind, though, because you've kind of incorporated that into your. It's not like you just said, "Okay, I'm done with that. You're actually doing that kind of thing still within your, but incorporate that into who you are.
Exactly. There's a definite through line for me in all of my experiences. When I have like these periods of time where I'm just very confused as to like how I got to where I am, like when I wake up in the morning and I'm like, wait a second, where exactly am I? I have to kind of take a step back and be like, no, this all makes sense. I can see a through line from point A to whatever point I'm at now. And it all makes sense. But there was a period of time where I was just very unsure of what I wanted to do. I've always been pretty good at what I do, whatever I do, but nothing really was super fulfilling to me until I started working with people in a very direct way, and being able to witness their lives in ways that I wasn't able to when I was just trying to sell their product or promote some kind of program, raise money, whatever they asked me to do.
So it's really hard to talk about your patient success stories because it's almost like, I mean, when you're talking about psychoanalysis, it's hard to even talk anecdotally about those stories without feeling like you're revealing some sort of patient confidence.
Sure.
But do you have any kind of stories that you can talk about without going over that confidentiality line about? So I guess I'm looking for anecdotal stories about working with a patient or a client and what you were able to help them achieve, and maybe the techniques that you find have been most helpful in
Okay.
having that happen.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So a lot of the people that come to me for therapy tend to be folks, like I said at the beginning, are high achievers. They tend to plunge themselves into their work or their passions very deeply. But kind of like what I was saying a minute ago, don't really truly understand, why they're doing what they're doing, or they're feeling as though they are unfulfilled, even though they're doing a lot of things that should be fulfilling. Maybe they think or believe that they don't have anything to offer the world, and so they feel disconnected from themselves, from the people around them, from the world that they live in or on.
You mean even if they're successful?
Even if they're successful, yeah.
So like an imposter kind of syndrome or something like that?
Yeah, definitely an imposter kind of syndrome. They have a hard time measuring success. A lot of the folks that I work with, if you or any of the listeners were to run into them on the street and realize who they were, they would they would ask them, "Are you kidding me? You don't believe that you're successful, right?" Because these folks, have made a lot of money, or they've reached certain levels of positional success in terms of their careers. Some of the people that I work with are names that you would probably recognize from going to see shows on Broadway or to listen to music or go to concerts, right? And so these people have it all, so to speak, or on one level. But then when it's them alone after they perform or after they secure a deal or after they, make some kind of move, when it's them alone, they just feel really empty. And so I work with them to really get an understanding as to who they are, why they do the things that they do, if those things are aligned with who they are, and where they want to go. And once we start to do those kinds of things, different existential issues tend to resolve. Depression, if it's there, tends to lift. Anxiety can really begin to dissipate. Relationships get stronger with themselves, with other people in their life, and we see a total realignment of what success means to that individual, and they tend to stop chasing whatever it was they thought it was initially.
So you said an existential threat, was it, that you described it as, or an existential?
What word did I use? I don't even remember. But like existential problems, concerns, challenges, right? Questions.
Do they feel like existential, but really they're not existential? They're more like in their mind they've made it into that.
Yeah, I think so. In a lot of cases, in the world that we operate in here in, the United States or the West, in the type of society and culture that we've developed, we are expected to live and act and push towards certain things in certain ways. And at the end of the day, I don't really believe that that way of being is actually super healthy or sustainable for the human being. We are able to do it for a while, but after a while, a certain period of time, it can be different for everyone. We burn out, or we have to make certain accommodations for ourselves in order to continue pushing forward. And so a real kind of individualist, or, me, myself, and I way of operating and chasing after success is not a healthy long-term strategy for human beings. And so one of the things that I really place an emphasis on in my work, whether I'm working with somebody in psychotherapy and counseling, or if I'm working with them in some other kind of mentoring or consultant kind of role, is really on the relationship, to let them know that, they're not alone. They are meant to do things in community with other people. And until we kind of get back to that real core base reality, we're going to feel like we're out there on a satellite, all by ourselves, just kind of, circumventing, whatever planet it is we're rotating.
So when you see somebody who's maybe really successful, and does it, and then they can end up isolated because the people that they're around maybe are not as successful, and so they don't have as. Is it that they don't have as many things in common, or they feel like they can't have a conversation with them, or they feel somehow odd, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. The thing that I find with these folks is that they actually tend to have a lot of people around them. They have staff, they have family, they have friends, and then they have a ton of people who think they are their friends or want to be their friends. And so there's a lot of people around them. But the reality is it's a very lonely existence, because you don't have the quality of relationships that maybe you would have if you didn't have certain certain things that you bring to the table. Money and fame tend to be very isolating things, as opposed to things that open up possibilities for you. On one hand, that opens up a lot of possibilities in terms of like having all of your needs materially met, but it also isolates you because you can't have the freedom to come and go as you please. Sometimes you have to be really suspicious of people that you surround yourself with. And so even though there are lots of people around them, maybe they only have one or two folks that they can actually trust. And so I tend to be one of those folks that they can actually trust after a while. And so I get to see them in ways that other people don't. But I think, if I can remember what your question was, success and stuff isn't really a key to having a lot of folks in your corner that are really meaningful.
So do you have like ordinary people? Like if I came into your practice and said, you know what, TJ, I really am whatever. I'm have this issue or that issue. And do you how do you specialize in? Well, let's go to the ordinary person. Then I'll ask the other.
Yeah. So the ordinary person, I have I have many ordinary people that come and see me.
Ordinarily they're exceptional, all of them in some way.
But sure. They're not all like, name brand people at all. All of them though, the commonality in all of the folks that I work with that get sent to me or that find me are that they're high achieving, they're very highly focused, and they tend to really get sucked into their work, and then from there their relationships either with themselves or with other people in their life suffer. Right.
Okay, so let me ask this from a business standpoint, because this is kind of interesting. So you have an interesting practice that a lot of practitioners would love to have or do. That would have affluent patients, clients, that seek you out or are referred to you. How did you end up there? And then the follow up to is how do you get those kinds of referrals?
Yeah, that's also a good question, and one that everybody who's trying to get their private practice going
Yes.
likes to ask, because they think that there's some kind of secret sauce or something that they have to find the recipe to and make it in order to do this. Honestly, there were a couple things that put me in position to have access to a referral stream that is like this. First, I graduated from in undergrad. I graduated from a school that was that spanned the breadth of artistic practice. So,
What school was that?
The University of the Arts in Philadelphia.
Okay.
So that school had visual arts, performing arts, communication arts, and out of that came tons and tons, many people that went on to do some really amazing things in the arts. And so I had a community that provided me with access to those folks, just because I was a student and they were my peers. And then later in that initial 15-year period of my initial career trajectory, I worked in administration at the University of the Arts, where I was in fundraising advancement. And so I built relationships with alums and people next to, I guess, parallel to or adjacent to alums, where that allowed me to gain some access to certain pockets. And then because I am an artist myself, I'm a painter. I show all across the country, and sometimes overseas. I just have access to different venues, and so basically what I'm saying is that if there was an ingredient list for this secret sauce that people believe I have, one of the first ingredients there would be luck, or just luck of proximity. Then for me now, after being in private practice for a little over 10 years, just 10 years now, 25. Being in my private practice for 10 years, all of my referrals are word of mouth now.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not because I have special access, although, I've developed those relationships over time. It's because myself, and any therapist that I happen to have working with me at any given time do good work, and that means we do good clinical work. We know the interventions we need to know. We practice from models that are effective, but also we really spend a lot of time building relationships with every single individual, couple, or family that comes to see us. And in today's world of psychotherapy, counseling, whatever it is you want to call it, there is a lot of emphasis based on interventions or models or approaches, and not so much anymore on the relationship between therapist and client. And I always go back to that as being the most important, because the data and the research says it's the most important. It's about 38% of the reason why psychotherapy is effective. We call that one of the common core, or the oh goodness, gosh, what is it? Common factors. Sorry, that's one of the common factors in psychotherapy is the relationship. So I put a very high price on relationship when people come to see me.
Versus, you think that there's more stress nowadays on the techniques than on the relationships?
So techniques are super important, but like on the model. So because because psychotherapy counseling has been dovetailed into the medical model. There's a very strong emphasis on very quick, very
time.
Yes. Right. And so because of that, the insurance companies, the payers, require certain models to be used, certain interventions to be utilized, certain amounts of time to get from point A to point B before they stop paying. And so it's really highly focused on symptom reduction, which is important, right? But as opposed to long-lasting change. Psychotherapy is an art and a science. And so it doesn't neatly fit into the medicalized model that physical healthcare can more easily do.
So when you have to deal with, basically you're dealing with insurance companies when you're talking about that, they can control your practice. Do you have, what percentage of your practice is insurance versus private pay?
0% is insurance for my practice. So
that gives you the ability to do exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, it does. It gives me great flexibility. I do sometimes. So there's a aspect of, or there's a version of payment called out of network. So in network is when you're using your insurance benefits completely, right? And insurance pays your provider. Private pay, cash pay is exactly what it maybe sounds like, which is you take the money out of your pocket and you hand it to your provider and pay privately. And then out of network is kind of sort of in the middle there, where you pay your provider like you would out of pocket, but that provider gives you documentation to then go and try and recoup some of your investment from your insurance plan. So I will play in the insurance sandbox a little bit. I'll put one foot in sometimes for people who want to try and get some reimbursement back. But I still have to then let them know that there are limitations then to what is held in confidence there. Anytime you invite insurance, I'll just say anytime you invite insurance to the party, they really are at the party, like they're a third person in the therapy room with you.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to talk about that because that's really something interesting I never really thought about. I think about that for, just regular healthcare, disclosing some illnesses and everything but I think from a psychological standpoint, or that if people make this, or companies make decisions about someone on the basis of their health, there's the HIPAA laws and everything.
Sure.
Then you just wonder. I don't know. I just really never thought about that, but it seems even more profound for psychological reasons. Sure. that would be the ability to share that somehow could be impinged upon, or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, insurance comes, and sits in the room. They're an invisible participant. At any point in time, they can decide that they want to see what we've been doing in therapy. Right. So it becomes incumbent upon me as the practitioner or the provider to keep my notes as simple as possible so that it doesn't really give too many details, not because I want to kind of avoid anything or do anything nefarious, but because I want to protect my client's privacy. But that doesn't avoid the necessity for me to diagnose them with something.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to be reimbursed by insurance, whether it's me being reimbursed by them or the client getting money back, they have to have a medical necessity. So
you got to put a label on them of some kind or another, when sometimes you probably don't want to put a label on them.
I would otherwise not. And so that is one consideration. So there are people who work in certain types of environments where a diagnosis or certain diagnoses could be really detrimental to their ability to obtain a position in that field or move up.
So I want to talk about that too.
Yeah, okay.
How do you, so given that HIPAA exists, and supposedly, there's a confidentiality between a physician or a caregiver and the patient, how could that potentially happen where someone would be, you end up either with a diagnosis or a discussion about certain things that they don't want out there that could affect your employment? How does that work?
Sure. So employers can see like their usage. So when employees are utilizing their health benefits, the organizations can see the use of those benefits because it affects what they're paying,
right,
out every year to the insurance plan, right? So they can kind of see who's using who's accessing the benefits more frequently than others. But a more kind of straightforward example would be folks who are members of the armed services. So they obviously have access to Veterans Affairs, right? Where they, in theory, can receive quality healthcare, mental health care, all the things, whenever they need them, right? And also when they're veterans, when they're active duty, same kinds of things apply, right? They have access to healthcare, they have access to mental health care. However, if they are accessing mental health care for issues such as PTSD, depression, anxiety, certain mood disorders, things like that, that's going to potentially affect their ability to remain in the service.
Mm-hmm.
So
what about for police?
Police are another one. LEOs, law enforcement officers, first responders of any type, paid firefighters, paid
they talk about stress. All those groups of people. I mean, military, policemen, firefighters. They're all under. Those are high stress jobs.
Yeah. Airline pilots are another one.
Airline pilots.
If they carry certain diagnoses or are on certain medications, they will be dismissed from their positions or taken out for a while. So there's people that really don't want to get a diagnosis on their chart, but they still need the support.
Right.
And so they'll choose to invest in their healthcare in a way that doesn't get anything linked to their permanent medical record.
Well, it seems like my personal opinion, but for what it's worth, department, it seems like that shouldn't exist. But I can see how this is all new,
Yeah.
kind of information for me.
Yeah. So I will say that there are municipalities, cities, governments and stuff that are departments that are really starting to come around in the way that they should, and remove some of that, stigmatization that has long perpetuated the mental health paradigm, which is amazing, which is great, because who wants to have an encounter with an officer who hasn't been taking care of his or her mental health? Who wants to have an encounter with an officer who, the day before, walked into some horrific situation or was a part of some horrific situation first person, and then immediately was turned around and sent back out into the field the next day without much debrief, without much crisis intervention, time off, etc. And that happens pretty regularly. But increasingly, departments are getting better at bringing those people off the field, and giving them the time and the access that they need. So the stuff that I'm talking about is kind of changing slowly, but it still exists and is manifested.
It's an interesting topic. It's just an interesting topic. So let me ask you this about your business. Because I know that you have the group coaching, events, workshops, and you do some speaking too. You actually I saw on your site, you had a bunch of different topics that you like to speak on. Is there any part of that business that you are that you want to grow, or are you just happy with the way that it is right now and want to just...
Yeah. So, I mean, that's an interesting question, and one that I go back and forth on all of the time. In fact, I was just thinking about it in some ways a little while ago, because I was writing a draft of a post to go out to some Substack subscribers, and I was thinking about my human design. Human design is a really interesting framework that is out there that kind of puts people, real basic overview is, it puts people in like 5 different categories of how they use their energy, how they see and interact with the world. And one of the types is a manifesting generator. And I am a manifesting generator, which means that I am not built to do, part of what it means is I am not built to do just like one thing. I am built to do many things and have lots of different ideas, and do many different projects. And to the outside viewer, I could look like I'm just very chaotic, like there's not rhyme or reason for what I'm doing. But like I was saying, we were talking about a little while ago, when I look at myself and I'm like, wait a second, where am I? Am I on Earth? I can see a through line, and everything connected. And so to your question about like, is there a part of my business that I want to grow over any other parts? I would say kind of yes and no, because what I do for the 60% of my time, if we're thinking about the breakdown like we talked about earlier, it's very, very intense. It's one-on-one or one-on-two, and it's just a grind,
It's not like you can hire somebody to, go do some counseling for me, would you?
Right.
I'm gonna subcontract this.
It's me. And it also is very limited in terms of then scaling and things like that. I mean, I can bring other therapists in, But when my name is on the practice and the other businesses that I operate, right, everybody tends to want to work with me. And so that's a challenge. So really, like scalability, there's only certain amounts of time in the day to make money. And if I'm only doing it one-on-one for all those hours, then I can't get very far. So where I would like to expand is more in line with teaching, workshopping, speaking, and like consulting. So going
Do
in.
you have any? Because I see a lot of what I call experts like yourself, that they will, and they do feel like they have a message that they want to get out there to a bigger group, and it's sort of, there's some frustration maybe even that they can't because it's only them. Um, do you have any sort of courses? Ever you thought about putting together some kind of a course that would address some issues that you have experience in?
Yeah. So I have thought about courses, and kind of evergreen offers.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be probably a pretty natural thing for me to do. And the answer to your question is yeah, I've thought about it.
Okay.
The other side of that is there are parts of it that don't really invigorate me, because I like the connection with actual people.
Mm-hmm.
And so like if I can get in front of people live and have it recorded and then have it offered on demand somewhere, which I do sometimes already, that is okay. But to actually like sit down and think about like a course and keeping it up to date, like that stresses me out. So it's more of like my own resistance versus like, would it work for what I'm trying to do?
Yeah. So it's an interesting take on it. Let me see if we've kind of been all over the gamut because I just like to, I just go by with what I'm curious about rather
Sure.
than some
Yeah.
sort of
No,
a
it's
setup
fine.
kind of things. I have a question. Do you find, because so you ended up working with a lot of artists because of your background, really, as opposed to intentionally seeking them out. They kind of seek you out because they feel like you understand, or you do understand, what their issues are. Do you feel like artists, because, or maybe even high performing people, that because they're in this group that they maybe are wired a little bit differently, and that's
Yeah. No. So that's a good intuition there. I will speak just in like broad terms because um, there's no like at least with what we can deal with today, like it's a pretty like anecdotal thing. Anecdotally, like yeah, like I think people are definitely wired differently when they are high achieving, or when they're creative in the way we're thinking about creativity right now. I will say that my visual arts people tend to be more on the depressed, moody side. My performing arts people tend to be more on the anxious, neurotic side. That's just anecdotal and what I've seen
right.
over the course of my time knowing, living with, and working with artists. So when I kind of look over my course of treatment with different people and like lay intake stuff next to each other, that's a general theme, and I can kind of anticipate like what kinds of things they're going to come in with. Visual artists being more depressed, moody, they tend to work in a much more solitary kind of way. They tend to navel gaze a lot. They tend to get stuck in some existential nihilistic thinking a lot of the time. for one reason or another. Or then we have our performers who are very, very they're very driven, they're very competitive, they're very much out there, they're assessed in different kinds of ways than a lot of people on the planet. And so they tend to have a lot of anxiety and a lot of frenetic energy that they come with. And so when I look at their stuff, I can kind of take a guess at what I might be dealing with. At the end of the day, we're all human beings and we're all seeking connection, acceptance, love, community. And all of those things is just kind of like how we're trying to like get it or how we're not getting it. That is the difference. And then for high achievers, people who are just like super driven, super hyper focused, we do tend to see a lot of neurodivergence at play.
So explain that to me.
Yeah, neurodivergent. Neurodivergent folks with ADHD people, autistic people, and those are the two big categories that everybody thinks about when they think neurodivergent. So yeah, people who are very highly focused and interested on certain things and drill into those, and to one extent or another, other things in their life kind of get put to the side. So I can say, myself, I have ADHD. I am ADHD. And so, I tend to be very focused on the things I'm interested in and not very interested in the things that, I'm not. And so, I tend to like follow lots of things, but they're all within a certain category. Right. And everything else is kind of chaotic. So people who are high achievers, the ones that I work with, tend to have a ADHD diagnosis as well.
So I think we're going to wind it up there. I could go on for quite a bit longer, but I think we've covered quite a ground. I really appreciate you coming on with me.
Yeah,
it was a real pleasure to have you on.
Well, that about winds it up for today. Thanks for tuning in to The Holistic Entrepreneur. I'm Zane Myers. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to our podcast or watch on YouTube. Join us next time as we continue to explore both the art of healing and the science of business in healthcare. We'll see you next time.